Hi, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel, Raids of the Ravenclaw. That would be an entirely different channel. Welcome to my channel, Reads of the Ravenclaw, and today I'm going to be talking to you about all of the books that I read this May. The first two books that I read were me finishing off my reread of the Harry Potter series. So the first book that I read this month was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and I think this was probably one of my favourite rereads, just because I don't really like the Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince film that much. I feel like, with the exception of Harry doing that like clicky Aragog impression, it just is really like lacking for me compared to a lot of the other films. So I think I must have thought that I didn't enjoy the book as much, but when I got to this book I actually really loved it. I forgot about all of the little things in here. I'm not really going to say too much about this book because it is a book that's like halfway through the series, so it's kind of a hard one to review out of the context of the whole series, and I spent most of my last wrap up going on and on about Harry Potter. But I will say that something I really appreciate, especially from like book 4 onwards, is just the way that J.K. Rowling kind of tightens the story around you. And I think something that I've always just appreciated about J.K. Rowling is she definitely doesn't look down to kids, and I think that's something that I really appreciated when I was younger, is that, you know, she doesn't keep the content of a book a certain scare level. You know, she trusts that children can deal with these things, or that parents of the children can decide that they can deal with these things, and she makes her stories progressively darker, and that just makes it feel like a more realistic kind of arc for it to take. And that's something that I've noticed a lot more, is just how dark these books do get, and how little 7-year-old me might have felt about that. But I remember at the time really enjoying how dark it was getting, and kind of getting frustrated at my parents being like, oh, you might be scared, because I don't really think that's what Harry Potter's about, and I definitely don't feel like J.K. Rowling sets out to scare people in any of these books, or to like scare little kids. She just does a really good job of making things tense and making things just have all their stakes heightened. Oh, and of course I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars because it's Harry Potter. I mean, come on. The next book I read this month was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling, to like nicely round off my reread. When I was younger I would always toss up between book 3 and book 7 as my favourite book in the series, and in this reread I've definitely confirmed that book 3 is my favourite of all the Harry Potter books. But I did really enjoy this reread. To be honest, the only things that I can really think to say about this are slightly more critical things, and I just want to like preface this by saying that I adore this book. It's my favourite series of all time. I would change nothing about it. But I did just like pick up on some things and notice some things that I experienced differently this reread from my first time round. First of all, how much time do they spend in that forest? I mean, it was just so long. I feel like in a Harry Potter musical, or like one of the sequels, one of them makes a dig at that, and something like, oh, why would we spend all that time in a forest? And I really felt that joke this time round I read that. Like, they're just in the forest all the time, and they're not even good at it. This reread also made me change my opinion on Albus Dumbledore more than any of the other rereads that I've done. I've read this book series about 9 times, but the last time was about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's been a while and I've grown a bit. And I definitely like Dumbledore less as a person, not as a character. I think he is an excellent and rich character, and I think I appreciate him as a character more in this reread, just less as a person. That being said, I do think that he's so morally complex, and that's something then when I was little I didn't really pick up on. I think through all of my first rereads, like strangely, I viewed Dumbledore the same way Harry did when he was my age when I was rereading it. I just kind of viewed him as this wise old figure. And now that I'm older, and the same sort of age Harry is in the last book, I'm kind of seeing Dumbledore in the light that he's shown more in later books, and I just find that really interesting. And I really can't wait to see what the Fantastic Beasts films do with his character, because, you know, Jude Law's been cast, and I think that it could just be so interesting to see where they take young, slightly less wizened up Dumbledore, because this book definitely made me appreciate how much of a complex character he is, even if I do think he's a slightly shadier person now. And despite me just like ranting on about the stuff that I found a little bit more problematic this reread, honestly does not mean I appreciated the book any less. It's still a 5 out of 5 stars, and it is still, in my opinion, one of the, if not the strongest conclusion just ever. The next book I read this month was the lowest rating of the month, and I feel so terrible about it because so many people love this book, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So this book is science fiction, and it focuses on the crew of a spaceship called the Wayfarer. Right at the start of this book, this crew is tasked with creating like a hyperspace tunnel between planets, and so they kind of go on this journey across the galaxy and across all of these different planets and different like war-torn places to just get to their job. I feel really bad for not enjoying this book because so many people loved it, and there were definitely elements of it that I really appreciated, but I don't know, there was just something about it that I just couldn't get into. I do wonder if a big part of it is down to the fact that I don't actually like science fiction that much. I'm really sorry if there are any big science fiction fans out there, but I don't enjoy it. I've only ever picked up a handful of science fiction books, and I've only ever really liked like one or two, and I don't know, this book just fell into that kind of grey area where I was just sort of meh about it. I'm not really a big fan of space or of sciencey things, and I know that sounds really like narrow-minded, but honestly just it's a pattern that I'm seeing established. Whether it's films, books, if they're set in space, I'm less likely to enjoy them. I did appreciate though that this isn't like super intense science fiction. I do think that if you're like the right sort of person for this book, it doesn't matter if you're a science fiction fan or not, you can get into it. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I did like first. First of all, I really like the messages on gender and sexuality and on just war and peace. I feel like Becky Chambers did a really good job on just making these kind of societal comments and observations without sounding really preachy, and I think when people are going to write books like that, if it sounds preachy, it annoys me. I hate it when people are telling me how to feel in books. I like it if they just show me things and I can make my own opinion about them. I also really love the characters. You have like a whole mixture of species that feature both on the ship and throughout the book, and Becky Chambers did a really good job of developing all of them individually and also the histories of their planets and of their people, and I really appreciated like the length, the depth that she went into. I thought it was really good and it really paid off. So in terms of the things that I was maybe less keen on, I find it really hard to pinpoint it, and I do sometimes find it hard to be critical about books because sometimes I know exactly what it is that I don't like about it and I know exactly why it didn't work, and sometimes it's just more I didn't like the vibe of the book or I just didn't get the mood of it, and I definitely think this is more like a second case kind of thing. I think that whilst I like the characters and whilst she developed them really well, I didn't develop that depth of empathy that I really needed to with all of them. I understood them and I liked them, but I wasn't as invested in all of their journeys as I maybe had to be, and because she does so many different perspectives, I had like a handful of characters that I really cared about and a handful of characters that were interesting but were just kind of easy to overlook sometimes. Also, the chapters in this book were really long, and sometimes because I've been going to bed later lately because I've been studying for exams and also just going on my phone, I'm not gonna lie, most of the time it's because I'm going on my phone, but I just will often want like a short chapter thing, something easy to get into, and if I feel like I'm slogging through these big long chapters, even though it's like a kind of a superficial thing, it is still something that can really grate on my nerves when reading a book. All of these little things that just made me not that into this book, so I ended up giving it a 2.75 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely say this is the sort of one where I think you kind of have to pick it up for yourself to decide, because just because it didn't work for me definitely doesn't mean it won't work for you. I don't hate this book, it's just one of those instances where I feel like it was not the right book for me. And the final thing that I read this month was a poetry collection, and that is Hold Your Own by Kate Tempest. I picked this poetry anthology up because I've been trying to read more poetry lately because I really enjoy it, but it's not something I reach for naturally, and I've heard a lot of great stuff about this, and I know that Kate Tempest has done a lot with spoken word poetry, and spoken word poetry is kind of how I started to get a little bit more into it, so I thought it would be a good way to just read poetry. I have slightly changed position because my camera stopped recording, so like let your eyes adjust. This collection is based around the Greek myth of Tiresias, I think that's how you pronounce it, Tiresias, who, from what Wikipedia has told me, began a man, became a woman. I think she might have then became a man again, and then she becomes a prophet for the gods. So it's a long lifetime, and it's a really interesting and dynamic one that Kate Tempest explores through this collection. I definitely think the thing I appreciated the most about this collection was just all of the little ties between like Tiresias's mythology world and our world. Like something that she did really well was just take a theme that was maybe drawn from his lifetime and just integrate it just so aptly and like excellently into modern day societal issues, and she looks at a lot of societal issues. She looks at empathy and war and relationships and gender and sexuality, all in this collection, all in this like tiny, easy to read collection, and it's somehow both relevant today and both really relevant to the mythology aspect. I think I'm not like a mythology expert or anything, but from what Wikipedia said, this seemed pretty relevant. Tempest just has a way with words. They look really simple on a page and they're not flashy, but you read them aloud, and she's just crafted the most gorgeous images and just ways of saying things. She's just got such a great grip on language, and the way that she uses it to just convey these ideas and these themes in like little poems is amazing. I kept a note on my phone of my favourite poems, and they were For My Niece, which isn't a very long poem, and it's also maybe not the best one in this collection, but my baby niece was born about 2 months ago now, so it resonated for me a lot when I read that. The Old Dogs Who Fought So Well, You Eat Me Up and I Like It, Man Down, Cruise Control and Radical Empathy. So those are some of my favourites. If you've got this anthology yourself, or if you were thinking of picking it up, I'd be really interested in knowing what your favourites are as well. I thought about quoting from this and finding some of my favourite quotes, but when I was looking through the collection just before I started filming, I realised that that's really hard to do, because I feel like no single quote I could give you would sum up why you should read this collection, because her poems, they're not like things that you can break down into one really nice quote, I don't think. They're meant to be read as the whole poem, and that's really how you get the full impact of it, is just if you see how she's building it up. And I don't really know how to explain that, but I definitely just think that her poems are like little stories, and they're not easy to split up into just single beautiful quotes, because they're so much more beautiful as like the whole piece. I would definitely recommend this if you're someone who's not read a lot of poetry, because it is very spoken wordy, and I think that if you're someone who hasn't read a lot of poetry before, the easiest way to maybe get a bit exposed to it is through spoken word on YouTube, just because of how big that is, and also just because the themes are so important and relevant, and I think they're really easy, especially for today's generation, to just get into. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. So those were the books and poetry that I've read this month. I'm sorry I've not been more regular with the uploads lately. I really wanted to be, but sometimes my motivation is just down here at the moment with exams. I promise, as soon as June is out of the way and we're into like July, August, I'm going to try and get a schedule going, but hopefully I'll see you a couple of times over the next month as well. So until then, thanks a lot for watching, and goodbye.